The storm did not warn anyone. It came from the east, rolling over the Blackrock cliffs like a living thing, swallowing the sky in grey and black. Lightning stitched through the clouds in long, crooked lines, and the thunder that followed shook loose stones from the ridge above Ashfall Hollow. The small human colony below did what it always did when the weather turned ugly. It shut its doors, bolted its corrugated panels, and waited. Daniel Cole did not wait. He was already deep in the ravine below the cliffs when the storm hit, his worn scavenger pack strapped to his back, a cracked plasma torch clipped to his belt. He had come looking for old ship fragments. There was a shattered section of the colony's generation ship that had skidded into this ravine when it crashed some 40 years before he was born. Sometimes, after a hard rain, new pieces surfaced. Copper coils, pressure valves, anything the colony's engineers could use. It was not exciting work. It was necessary work. Daniel was the kind of man who understood the difference. He was 31, lean from years of light rations, with rough hands and a habit of keeping his mouth shut until he had something worth saying. The people of Ashfall Hollow trusted him the way you trust a tool, quietly, completely, without much ceremony. He was not a leader, he was just someone who showed up. He was crouched near a half-buried metal panel when he heard it. Not thunder, something else. A sharp, shrieking cry, high and broken, coming from above. He looked up through the rain just in time to see something dark tumble out of the clouds and drop fast, spinning, its wings folding wrong. It struck the far wall of the ravine with a sickening crack and slid down in a shower of loose rock, landing somewhere below him in the dark. Daniel stood still for a moment. He knew what Dracs were. Everyone in the colony did. They were the dragon-like rulers of this world, winged and ancient, enormous when grown, and deeply dangerous to anything that wandered near their territory. The cliffs above belonged to them. The sky above belonged to them. Humans stayed low and stayed quiet, and the Dracs mostly ignored the small dirt colony that scratched at the planet's surface far below their citadel. The smart thing to do was leave. He climbed toward where the creature had fallen. It took him nearly 20 minutes to find it in the dark and rain. He almost missed it. The creature was small, smaller than he expected, curled against a boulder with one wing bent at a terrible angle. It was barely the size of a large dog. Storm blue scales, dark as wet slate, with eyes the color of pale fire. A hatchling, very young. It saw him and snapped. Tiny teeth, already sharp, caught nothing but rain and air. It tried to back away and yelped when the motion pulled at its broken wing. Daniel stopped moving. He set his pack down slowly. He lowered himself to the ground, sitting in the mud and rain, and said nothing. He did not reach for it. He did not try to calm it with words the creature could not understand. He just stayed there, at a distance, still and quiet, the way old Tomlin had once taught him to approach a frightened animal back when the colony still kept livestock. Time passed. The rain did not stop. Slowly, very slowly, the hatchling stopped snapping. It watched him with those pale eyes, chest heaving, trembling from cold or pain or both. It made a low, clicking sound deep in its throat. Daniel moved then, inch by inch, reaching into his pack. He pulled out the emergency cloth he kept for wrapping salvage, tore 2 strips from it, and held them up where the creature could see them. Then he waited again. Another 10 minutes passed. The hatchling lowered its head slightly, not a welcome, just exhaustion. Daniel moved forward on his knees, through the mud. The creature flinched, but did not strike. He worked carefully, quickly, the way he worked on broken machinery, no wasted movements, no panic. He straightened the bent wing as gently as he could, and the hatchling made a sound like grinding glass and then went quiet, trembling hard. He used his strips of cloth to bind the wing against a flat piece of scrap metal he found nearby, making a rough splint. He took off his outer jacket and draped it over the creature's back. When he was done, he sat back. The hatchling looked at him for a long moment. Then it made the clicking sound again, softer this time, and let its head rest on the ground. Daniel looked up at the cliffs above. Somewhere up there was a kingdom full of creatures that would kill him for touching their young. He knew that. He looked back down at the small broken thing lying in the mud with his jacket over it. He stayed the night. By morning, the storm was gone. The hatchling was still breathing, and it had shifted during the night, tucking itself closer to his side for warmth, without either of them quite noticing when it happened. Daniel gave it the last of the dried rations in his pack, which it ate without hesitation. He thought about what to call it, looking at the black rock walls around them. Rook, he decided, simple enough. He did not know, sitting there in that ravine in the pale morning light, that the small creature sleeping beside him was a prince. He did not know that the name he had just given it would one day be spoken in the great hall of a kingdom that no human had ever entered. He only knew the little thing was hurt, and he had helped it. That was enough. Rook did not want him to leave the first morning. Daniel had stood up, pulled his jacket back on, and shouldered his pack. He had taken 3 steps toward the ravine path before the hatchling made a sound, not the snapping cry from the night before, but something lower, almost like a question. Daniel had turned around. Rook was sitting upright on his good wing, watching him with those pale, fire-colored eyes, making that soft clicking sound. Daniel pointed at him firmly. "Stay." Rook clicked again. "I will come back," Daniel said, which was a strange promise to make to a creature that could not understand him. He made it anyway, and then kept walking before he could talk himself out of leaving. He came back the next morning, and the morning after that. He brought food, mostly dried protein strips and scraps from the colony kitchen, which Rook ate with great enthusiasm and no manners whatsoever. He brought clean cloth to check the splint. He brought nothing else because he had nothing else to spare. But he showed up every day, climbing down into the ravine before the rest of Ashfall Hollow woke, spending an hour with the hatchling before heading back up for his regular work. Old Tomlin noticed the change in his schedule within 4 days. Tomlin was 60-something, built like a compressed wall, and had been the colony's lead engineer before his knees gave out and the job passed to Daniel. He had also been Daniel's closest thing to a father for most of his life. He noticed everything. "You are going near the cliffs," Tomlin said one evening. It was not a question. "Yes," Daniel said. "Drac territory." "Yes." Tomlin was quiet for a long moment. "You are going to get everyone here killed over something stupid, aren't you?" "Probably not," Daniel said. Tomlin looked at him the way he always looked at broken machinery, assessing the damage, calculating the cost of repair. "What did you find?" "A hatchling wing was broken. I splintered it." The silence that followed was the loudest silence Daniel had ever heard Tomlin produce. "A royal hatchling," Tomlin said finally, very quietly, "is the one thing in this world that we cannot afford to be connected to, if they think we took it. I didn't take it, it fell, I helped it, I'm still helping it." "Daniel." "I know," Daniel said, "I know." But he went back the next morning anyway. By the end of the second week, Rook's wing had healed enough to extend fully. He stretched it out in the cave one morning, testing the joint, and made a triumphant rumbling sound when it moved without pain. He immediately tried to fly, launched himself off a boulder, and crashed directly into Daniel's chest. Daniel caught him mostly by instinct, staggering back 2 steps. Rook clung to his jacket and made a sound that was absolutely, unmistakably smug. "You did that on purpose," Daniel told him. Rook clicked. The creature had grown bigger over the 2 weeks, not dramatically, but noticeably. His scales had brightened slightly, the dark storm blue now carrying a faint metallic sheen at the edges. He had also developed opinions. He did not like it when Daniel left. He did not like rain, which was inconvenient given the planet's weather. He liked having the ridge of his jaw scratched, which Daniel had discovered by accident and now used regularly to keep the hatchling calm enough to sit still for wing checks. Word spread through the colony the way words always spread through small places, quietly, sideways, through glances and half-conversations. People were frightened. Daniel understood that. He did not blame them. Then, 16 days after the storm, he arrived at the ravine to find Rook pressed against the far wall of the cave, very still, watching the ravine entrance with narrowed eyes. Daniel stopped. He listened. He heard them before he saw them, the heavy rhythm of large winged creatures landing on rock, the clank of what could only be armor plates shifting. He stepped into the cave entrance and looked up. 6 Dracs, fully grown, wearing the dark metal chest plates of the Royal Guard, were descending the cliff face toward the ravine. At their head was one larger than the others, with a ridge of bone-white crests along his skull and cold black eyes that found Daniel immediately. Commander Ithran. Daniel did not know his name then, but he would learn it. Ithran landed 10 feet away and drew himself to full height, which was considerable. He looked at Daniel. He looked at Rook. His expression, difficult to read on a draconic face, shifted into something that was clearly fury. He said something in the Drac tongue, which Daniel did not speak. The tone translated well enough. Daniel raised both hands slowly, palms out. Rook moved. The hatchling crossed the space between them in 2 quick steps and planted himself directly in front of Daniel, facing Ithran, small and bristling and absolutely fearless. He spread his healed wings, both of them fully, and made a sound that was far too large and serious for his size. Ithran stopped. The guards behind him exchanged looks. Rook clicked, he clicked again. He turned his head back to look at Daniel once, then faced Ithran again, his posture saying, without any language at all, something perfectly clear. He is mine, you do not touch him. Ithran lowered his weapon arm after a long, frozen moment. He did not lower his eyes. He looked at Daniel with an expression that had moved from fury into something harder to name, something between suspicion and confusion. He said something again, short and sharp. The guards moved forward, not to strike, but to surround. Daniel kept his hands up and did not run. Running would not have helped. He looked down at Rook once, who had not moved from in front of him. Good boy, Daniel said quietly. Rook clicked one more time and then sat down, like the matter was settled. They were taken up the cliff toward the kingdom, and Daniel did not look back. No human had walked through the gates of the Drac citadel before. Daniel could feel that fact in the silence. Every Drac they passed, workers, soldiers, citizens going about their day, stopped and stared. The citadel was carved directly into the cliff face, its halls wide enough for creatures with 20-foot wingspans, its ceilings so high that Daniel's torch would not have reached them. The stone was black and smooth, worn glossy by centuries of clawed feet. Fires burned in iron brackets along the walls, and the air smelled like sulfur and something older than smoke. Rook walked beside him the whole way, calm, occasionally bumping his head against Daniel's leg when the guards pressed too close. The throne room opened ahead like the inside of a mountain. Queen Selvaria was not what Daniel expected, though he had not spent much time imagining her. She was enormous, the largest living creature he had ever stood near, with scales the color of deep water and gold, a crown of natural bone-white horns that curved back from her skull, and eyes that were the same pale fire color as Rook's, but colder, older, and much harder. She was looking at Daniel the way he sometimes looked at a machine he had never seen before, trying to understand what it did, whether it was useful, and whether it was dangerous. Ithran spoke first. He gave what was clearly a report, long and detailed. Selvaria listened without moving. Then she looked at Daniel and spoke, in the common trade language that both their kinds had learned out of necessity over the last 50 years. You were found in my son's company, she said. Her voice was deep and measured. In our territory, with your hands on him. I was helping him, Daniel said. You were touching him. His wing was broken. He would have died in that ravine. Selvaria's gaze did not waver. Humans do not enter Drac lands. Humans do not approach Drac young. You understand why I must consider that you did this deliberately. I understand, Daniel said. I didn't. A murmur moved through the room. Ithran's jaw tightened. You expect me to believe, Selvaria said slowly, that a human, alone, stumbled upon a royal hatchling by accident, chose to approach a creature your kind fears, and spent 16 days caring for him out of simple kindness. Yes, Daniel said. That is a very simple answer. It is a very simple truth. Selvaria studied him. Rook, sitting beside Daniel, had been making soft sounds throughout the exchange, low, clicking, insistent. Every few sentences he would look up at his mother with that same expression Daniel had seen the first morning in the ravine, something between urgency and frustration, the face of a creature who had something important to say and no words sufficient to say it. Selvara looked at her son for a long moment. Then she said something in the Drac tongue, softer, just to Rook. Rook answered a series of sounds, different lengths and pitches, some of which Daniel had heard before in the ravine. It went on for almost a full minute. At several points, Rook stretched out his healed wing, showing it to his mother. At one point he turned and pressed the top of his head against Daniel's side. Selvara was quiet after that. She gestured to one of her advisors, who stepped forward and examined the wing closely, running a careful claw along the joint, finding the splint marks, the lines where the cloth had been tied. The advisor leaned toward Selvara and spoke quietly. The room waited. Then the doors to the throne room opened again. Old Tomlin walked in, which was not something Daniel had expected. Behind him came two of the colony elders, gray-haired, frightened, but upright. They had come on their own, Daniel realized. They had followed. They had walked into Drac territory voluntarily for him. Tomlin looked around the throne room once, slowly, then looked at the Queen. I taught him, Tomlin said, without being asked. His voice was steady. He was 12 years old when I found him trying to fix a broken water pump with wire and prayer. I taught him engineering. I taught him how to work carefully with broken things. He paused. I did not teach him to leave things broken when he could fix them. That part he already knew. Selvara's gaze moved from Tomlin to Daniel and back. He could have left your son, Tomlin continued. Your son would have died. Nobody in our colony would have known, and we would have had no trouble from your kingdom. That would have been the safer choice. That is not the choice he made. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. Something had shifted in it. Selvara rose from her seat, a slow movement, wings folding tighter, full height filling the room, and walked forward until she stood directly before Daniel. This close, she was overwhelming. He did not step back. She looked down at him for a long time. Then she looked at Rook, who looked back at her with those pale eyes, steady and certain. I believe you, she said at last. The words sounded like they cost her something. I believe you helped my son, and because you helped him, and because you are human, the consequences of this bond are ones I cannot allow to continue. Daniel said nothing. You will leave these lands, Selvara said. You will not return. You will not seek contact with my son. This is not a punishment. This is what is necessary. Other kingdoms watch us. They would use this connection against him and against your people. She turned away. You saved his life, she said, not turning back. I do not forget that, but that is all I can give you. The guards stepped forward. Daniel looked at Rook one last time. Rook was staring at him, wings pressed flat, making no sound. His pale eyes were very wide. It's all right, Daniel said quietly. He let the guards lead him out. He did not see the Queen lower her head slowly after he was gone, or the way she pressed the top of her jaw against her son's small head, holding it there for a long, still moment while the throne room stayed silent around them. 3 years passed the way hard years do, without ceremony, without pause. Ashfall Hollow grew slowly. A second water filtration unit went online. A new section of the old ship hull was salvaged and converted into a covered repair bay. 12 new children were born into the colony, which was more than the previous 5 years combined, and people started talking, carefully and quietly, about whether this place might actually become something permanent. Daniel was at the center of most of it, not because he asked to be, but because he showed up. He became the colony's chief engineer the year after the Drac trial, when Tomlin's knees finally refused to cooperate with the job's demands. The work was relentless: power systems, water, hull integrity, communications, and Daniel was good at it in the same way he was good at most things, which was to say he worked at it until he was, and then he worked some more. He did not speak about Rook, not to the other engineers, not to the elders, not to Tomlin, who had seen everything and said nothing. The memory of those 16 days in the ravine lived in a quiet part of him, and he left it there. He did not know that Rook had not forgotten. The Drac Prince had grown in the way that hatchlings of his kind grew, quickly at first, then in steady surges that left him larger and stronger each season. By the end of the first year, he was twice the size he had been in the ravine. By the end of the second, he was large enough to carry a full-grown adult in his claws. He had begun flight training, combat training, the diplomatic education expected of a future ruler. He was, by all accounts, a good student. He was also, whenever he could manage it without being caught, slipping away to the edge of Drac territory to look down at the small colony below. He never crossed the border. His mother's order lived in him with the weight of law, and he was not someone who broke his mother's laws lightly. But the border was a line on the ground, not in the sky, and there was a particular ridge above Ashfall Hollow where a young Drac could perch, unseen against the dark rock, and watch the small lights in the human settlement move in their patterns below. He watched Daniel most often, though he was too far to see individual faces clearly. He recognized him by the way he moved, practical, purposeful, the same quality of motion that had knelt in the mud beside a broken hatchling without any hesitation. Rook did not know the word for what he felt. His kind had words for loyalty and debt, for territory and honor. They had a word, old and serious, for a bond made without speaking. He turned that word over in his mind sometimes when he sat on the ridge and watched the lights below. Meanwhile, trouble was building in the south. The warlord Draven had ruled a rival Drac faction for a decade, and in the last year he had stopped pretending to respect borders. His forces raided smaller kingdoms, seized resources, and pushed steadily northward. He had a particular hatred for human settlements, which he called infections, small, ugly things spreading across a world that did not belong to them. He was not wrong that humans were considered low in the hierarchy of this world. He was very wrong about what that meant. Queen Selvara watched Draven's movements and prepared quietly. She reinforced border patrols. She recalled 2 of her senior commanders from distant postings. She had 3 private conversations with her council about Draven's likely next target, and the council agreed on one point. The colonies to the north, human settlements mostly, were exposed, and Draven knew it. Rook sat in on 2 of those council meetings. In the second one, he said something that made the room go very still. "We should warn them," he said, "the human colony on the North Shelf. If Draven moves that way, they will have no warning at all." The council looked at each other. Ithran, who sat on Selvara's left, said carefully, "That is outside our boundaries of concern." "It is inside our boundaries," Rook said. "Literally, they are 20 miles from our southern gate. If Draven takes that position, he has a staging ground at our door." "The prince raises a tactical point," one of the older advisors said. Rook had raised more than a tactical point, and everyone in the room knew it. But they let it stand as one, and Selvara said she would consider it, and the meeting ended. She sent no warning. 3 weeks later, Draven's advance forces crossed the northern shelf under cover of a heavy storm. Daniel was in the repair bay when the colony's perimeter sensors screamed. He was on his feet before the second alert sounded, moving toward the power core at a run, because he had thought about this moment before, had planned for it quietly, without telling anyone why, the way you plan for things you hope never come. He had reinforced the power core housing 18 months ago with hull plating twice as thick as it needed to be. He had set the backup generator on a separate circuit. He had buried the fuel lines. He had thought about what it would take to keep the lights on if something came. The something had come. Draven's soldiers hit the outer wall in 3 waves, ground troops in exoframe armor, using captured Drac fire breath weapons converted into portable sprayers. The outer panels caught quickly. The perimeter defense grid absorbed the first wave and was failing into the second. Daniel made it to the power core and started the backup sequence. He was still working when the wall behind him came down. The impact that followed was not something he had planned for, a chunk of reinforced panel blasted inward by a fire weapon, struck him across the back and shoulder. He went down hard. The backup sequence was still running. He could hear it cycling, the low hum of it, even from the floor. He tried to get up. His left arm did not cooperate. He tried again, got one knee under himself, and then the second wave of debris hit, and the lights went out. Somewhere far above, on a ridge he was not supposed to be on, a young Drac had been watching the lights of the colony below when they suddenly went dark. Rook was already moving before he understood why. Rook came out of the dark sky like a storm that had chosen a direction. He was not the small hatchling from the ravine anymore. 3 years had made him large enough that his wingspan blocked the stars when he opened up above the colony, and what came out of him when he landed among Draven's soldiers was not the uncertain clicking of a frightened young creature. It was something ancient and enormous, a sound that hit the chest before it hit the ears. He had been trained to fight. He had not yet fought like this. Draven's soldiers scattered on instinct. A few held their positions and raised their weapons, which was brave and useless. Rook moved through them the way a fire moves through dry wood, not wastefully, not slowly, with a total and complete certainty of direction. He was protecting something specific, and every creature that stood between him and that thing was in the wrong place. He found the power core building by memory. He had watched the colony long enough, from his ridge far above, that he knew its shape the way you know a place you have visited in dreams. He tore the collapsed section of wall aside with his claws, careful, even in the middle of battle, the way he had seen a particular human be careful once, working over a broken wing in the rain, and found Daniel on the floor. Still breathing. Rook pressed his nose against Daniel's face and made a sound that had no military purpose whatsoever. It was the same sound he had made in the ravine 3 years ago when he had first allowed the strange, quiet creature to come close. The low clicking sound that meant, in a language with no words, something like, "I know you, you are here, I have you." Daniel stirred, his eyes opened, unfocused, and then focused. He looked up at Rook for a long moment, at the storm blue scales and the pale fire eyes, larger now but unmistakably, completely the same. "Rook," he said. Rook clicked. "You are not supposed to be here," Daniel said. Rook clicked again, with what was clearly disagreement. Outside, the battle had not resolved. Draven's forces were regrouping. They had come with enough soldiers to take the colony thoroughly, and one young Drac, even a capable one, was not enough to stop them entirely. The ground troops had pulled back from Rook's initial impact, but they were pressing the colony's outer edges again, and the colony's own defense systems were running on the backup power that Daniel had managed to get running before he went down. Rook could not be everywhere at once. He knew it. He stayed at the power core anyway, crouched over Daniel, wings spread, because some calculations are not about winning. Some are about what you refuse to let happen. Then the sky changed. The colony's people, those who could see the sky from where they were sheltering, said afterward that they heard it before they saw it. A sound like weather, like the air itself, had decided to move in a different direction. Then the southern sky lit up with fire. Organized and purposeful, and the shapes that appeared above the ridge were large and armored and moving fast. Queen Selvara came with the full royal guard. 17 adult Dracs, the finest soldiers in the kingdom, with Selvara herself at the front. She came in low over the colony and hit Draven's forces from above while they were still watching Rook, which was exactly the kind of mistake you made when you only knew to watch for one problem. The battle after that was short. Draven's soldiers were capable fighters. They were not capable of fighting both the colony's defense grid and 17 trained Drac warriors from 2 different directions at once. The warlord's forces broke and ran in under 4 minutes, scattering south across the shelf toward wherever Draven was waiting for a victory report he was not going to receive. When the noise stopped, Selvara landed. She was larger than Rook and moved differently, with the weight of authority, each step deliberate, carrying the awareness of someone who knew their own significance. She walked to the ruined power core building, looked at the wall her son had torn aside, and looked at Rook crouched inside it over a wounded human. She was quiet for a while. Rook looked at her. He did not stand down. He did not look ashamed. Selvara made a sound in the Drac tongue, something soft, something that was not a command. Rook made a sound back, just one. She looked at Daniel, conscious now, sitting upright against the inner wall with his left arm held carefully against his chest. He met her eyes and said nothing. He requires a healer, Selvara said. I'm all right, Daniel said, which was clearly not true. He requires a healer, Selvara repeated, to Rook this time, and Rook shifted aside just enough to allow two of the guards' healers to approach. The royal healers worked quickly, efficiently, in the way of people who had treated battle injuries before. They had brought their supplies, the same materials used on Drac royalty, which had never before been used on a human. They used them now without being asked twice. Selvara watched. Around the colony, the lights were coming back on, one section at a time, as Daniel's backup systems cycled fully into place. The people of Ashfall Hollow were beginning to emerge from their shelters, cautiously, watching the large armored creatures moving through their settlement with wide eyes and very careful stillness. Rook stayed beside Daniel the whole time the healers worked. He did not speak, he did not move away. Selvara watched her son, and something in her expression shifted, not quickly, not dramatically, but the way stone changes under slow water, the stubbornness wearing down into something else, something that looked, if you knew her face well enough, like the beginning of understanding. One of the colony's elders approached her. "Thank you," the elder said simply. Selvara looked at her. "My son made a decision," she said. "I came to stand behind it." She paused. "That is what a mother does." The elder looked at Rook. He did not hesitate. "No," Selvara said, "he never did." She glanced at the human on the floor, breathing steadily now, the healer wrapping his shoulder. He learned that from someone. She did not say who. She did not need to. Rook clicked softly beside Daniel, and Daniel, without thinking, reached up and scratched the ridge of the dragon's jaw exactly as he had 3 years ago in a rainy cave. Rook's eyes closed halfway. The battle was over. Everything else was just beginning. Daniel healed slowly. The Drac healers were skilled but cautious with him. Human biology was not something they had studied, and they worked carefully, asking questions through a translator and adjusting their methods when the answers required it. His left shoulder had been fractured by the debris impact. 2 ribs were cracked. He had a gash across his back that needed closing. He was moved, while unconscious during the worst of it, into the citadel. He woke in a room carved from smooth black stone, lit by the same iron-bracketed fires he had seen 3 years ago in the throne room corridor, with Rook lying across the doorway like a very large, very deliberate lock. He stared at the ceiling for a while. "I am in the Drac Kingdom again," he said. Rook opened one eye. "At least no one is pointing anything at me this time." Rook closed the eye. He recovered over 12 days, which was faster than anyone expected, including the healers. Tomlin came on the 3rd day and sat with him for an hour, saying very little. In the way Tomlin showed, he was relieved. The colony elders came on the 5th day and updated him on the repair work. The outer wall was already being rebuilt. The defense grid was being rewired, and 3 of the 4 destroyed panels had been replaced. Life in Ashfall Hollow had a way of moving forward, because the people who lived there had no practice with any other direction. Queen Selvara visited on the 7th day. She came alone, which surprised him. She folded herself into the room carefully, given that it was not built for her full size, and settled in the space near the far wall. Rook, who had been sleeping in the doorway, moved to make room for her without being asked. "You are recovering," she said. "Yes," Daniel said. "Good." She was quiet for a moment, looking at him in that same assessing way she had in the throne room 3 years ago, but the coldness was gone from it. "I owe you an accounting," she said at last. "You do not," Daniel said. "I have been told that twice already today," Selvara said. "Rook said it, Ithran said it, which surprised me greatly. The faintest change moved across her face, not quite a smile, but something adjacent. I will do it anyway. I made a decision 3 years ago that prioritized politics over truth. You helped my son without being asked. I thanked you by exiling you. She paused. That was not justice. Daniel looked at her for a moment. You kept your people safe, he said. That is what a ruler does. You sound like me, she said. I have been told that twice already today, Daniel said. Silvara made a sound, then that was, unmistakably, a laugh, low and rolling, the kind that clearly did not come out very often. Rook's head lifted in the doorway, and he looked at his mother with obvious surprise. The formal ceremony came on the 12th day. It was held in the great outer courtyard of the citadel, which was large enough to hold several hundred dracs comfortably. Daniel was informed of this the morning before, and spent an uncomfortable few hours being measured for a formal coat by two very earnest drac attendants who had clearly never made something for a human before, but were determined to succeed. They succeeded. He stood in the courtyard at midday, Rook on one side and Ithran, straight-backed and formal, and making no effort to look pleased, which was the closest he came to respect, on the other. The courtyard was full. Every citizen of the citadel who could attend had attended, and more had come from the surrounding kingdom, lining the cliff walls and the broad stone steps in long rows. Silvara stood before Daniel on the courtyard floor, the full royal guard behind her, her crown of bone-white horns catching the light. She spoke first in the Drac tongue, addressing her people. The speech was long. Daniel understood none of it, but the crowd was absolutely still throughout, and he watched their faces and thought he understood the shape of it, the shape of something serious and new being handed to a people who were not sure how to hold it yet. Then she spoke in the common tongue, looking directly at him. 3 years ago, a human entered a ravine and helped a broken creature because it was the right thing to do. He did not ask what the creature was worth. He did not ask for payment. He did not consider whether it was safe. She paused. Those of us who were watching considered all of those things for him, and we failed him in every way that mattered. The courtyard was silent. Today, by the authority of my crown and the laws of this kingdom, I name Daniel Cole a bonded of the crown, first of his kind, not as a servant, not as a subject, but as someone whose bond to this house has been proven in the oldest possible way, by action freely given, without cost, without condition. She stepped forward and placed one great claw briefly on his uninjured shoulder. The courtyard erupted. Not in cheering, it was not the sound of a crowd celebrating a victory. It was something deeper and quieter and more complicated, the sound of hundreds of creatures processing something that had broken through their assumptions about what was possible. Some of the younger dracs made sounds that their elders quickly recognized as the sound they made when something overwhelmed their composure. The older ones were not much better. Ithran, who had stood absolutely rigid throughout the ceremony, looked straight ahead at nothing in particular with an expression that suggested he was having a private battle with himself, that he was losing. Daniel looked out at the courtyard, at the hundreds of scaled faces and pale fire eyes, at the cliff walls lined with dracs who had come to witness this, and he thought about a ravine and a storm and a broken little creature in the mud. He had made a very small decision that night. He had not understood then how much could be built from a very small decision. Rook stepped up beside him and pressed the top of his head against Daniel's shoulder. The same motion he had made 100 times in a cave 3 years ago, the same motion that had no name in any language but meant something that both of them understood completely. Daniel reached up and scratched the ridge of his jaw. Rook's eyes closed halfway. Behind them, the kingdom stood in tears. Later, when the ceremony was over and the courtyard had slowly emptied and the fires in the citadel were burning low, Daniel sat with Rook on the high wall at the edge of the citadel, looking out at the world below. The human colony of Ashfall Hollow was visible in the distance, its lights small and steady. "They are going to write about this," Daniel said. Rook made the clicking sound. "Humans, I mean. We write everything down. There will be a record somewhere that says a human engineer who had no business being in a ravine found a baby dragon in the mud and made a very poor decision with very good results. Rook clicked again, softly. It did work out, Daniel agreed. The lights of Ashfall Hollow glowed in the distance. The citadel fires burned behind them, and somewhere between those two places, a line that had existed for generations was no longer quite where it used to be. It had not been moved by a war or a treaty or a great political decision. It had been moved by a jacket left over a shivering hatchling in a rainy ravine. Daniel looked at the sky for a while. It was clear tonight, full of stars that did not belong to anyone in particular. Then he looked at Rook. "Good boy," he said. Rook clicked once. It meant always.